It's up to you. You're welcome to leave it on, take it off, use the blanket.
Now I know where that blanket came from. They stole it from my house.
Well,
It's Costco's.
this one is not. This
No?
one actually is, even though it's a good one, it actually has our embroidery of our logo on.
Oh, well, yeah.
Is that good for you?
Yeah.
Okay, would you like a cup of water?
No, I'm fine.
Barb, would you like a cup of water?
Just to have next to me, yeah.
I can do that.
You might want it also.
Yeah, okay, I'll have them, please.
All right. We'll do.
Freezing, always cold. You think you can answer all of these?
Absolutely. You want to have a bet?
I'm sure you will. You can take as long as you want and talk as long as you want. There's no time limit.
No, I don't want to.
No, there's no time limit. Can go an hour and a half, go 2.5, 3, whatever. And you can break whenever you need to.
You're going to be asking me the questions. Could have, had I known, I would have paid you off in my house.
I thought you did.
This lady is on the take. I'm a witness.
She's on the take? Well, I hope she's getting a lot for whatever she's on the take for. And just in the event, there are some tissues here,
Thank you.
and you did have the trash can somewhere.
We did, someone took it.
Someone snagged it. Let me grab a trash can.
Yeah, that's. Steak?
Well,
Have to get you a bib so you don't dribble it on you, but
No, I dribble over everything.
if you would have said a bourbon or a scotch, I would have been right there with you.
No.
Are we using that mic, or are we doing a?
You've got your lav on you. Nope, we have this. This is the mic we use every time.
Oh, I think
Every time.
every time. Boy, I'm losing it.
No, you're good. You're good. Would you like a bourbon?
Not baffled yet, but.
It will after you sit.
Yes.
Barb, are you ready? Alvin, are you ready?
I'm
Yep.
not ready.
No, we need a
I'm
slate.
slacking here.
We need a slate.
I'm slacking.
Okay,
All right.
I am rolling.
If you will hold that, please. She is going to read this.
Today is September 19th, 2023. I'm here to interview Melvin Blankfield. Feld. My name is Barbara Beyer. We're in West Palm Beach, Florida, WPEC Studios. Please tell me your name, please.
Melvin Blankfeld.
And could you spell that? Last name.
Both, or last name, Blankfeld.
And what was your name at birth, Mr. Blankfeld?
Melach Greenspan.
And could you
But,
spell that, please?
Green Spin, I believe.
Thank you. What is your date of birth?
10/15/39.
Which makes you how old today?
In 2 weeks, I'll be 84.
Where were you born?
Lida, Poland.
And what was your mother's name?
Riva
And her last name before she was married?
Bojarski, Bojarski.
Do you recall your mother's date of birth?
I think it's August 15th, 1917.
Thank you. What was your mother's occupation?
Housewife.
Describe your mother's personality and your relationship with her.
At what point? When I was a baby?
As early as you can go back to remember.
Great. Later on, she was a tough woman. In the woods, she used to go out and fight with the men. She would go in the woods, and I would take along, and she would cut down trees and build her own Zimlanke, which is a little house.
We'll get to that.
Okay,
What was your relationship with her when you were a youngster, before the war?
great.
Your biological father,
Mhm.
tell me about him.
I know absolutely nothing, except a couple of days ago when I picked up my daughter. She was on a cell phone in the car, and she kept saying, I came here to Belarus, I got Belarus and Lita, and a name keeps popping up, Melach. And I said, Julie, that's me. And then she cracked up, and then a moment later she says, I got your father's name, Solomon. So that's the first time I've ever heard
So your name is now Blankfeld. So
Blankfeld.
what happened that you have Blankfeld name now rather than Greenspun?
Great.
What happened to your biological father?
He evidently was killed in the war when the Germans invaded my town, or my shtetl.
What siblings were born to your biological father?
I have no idea.
What do you recall of any aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents?
Only one. That was my Uncle Teddy.
Tell me about him.
Well, he was the youngest in the family, and after the war, he was taken out. I was just going over this suddenly in my head early this morning, and we had a friend. His name is Avremke, who eventually settled in Massachusetts and Boston, and he was a guard in a prison. And that evening, he asked my uncle to keep him company at work. And my uncle said no. And I was in a bunk bed, I remember, on the top. And suddenly there was pounding on the door, and there were two or three Russian soldiers who came in, and they dragged my uncle out, Teddy. And the next morning, I remember being at home, but my mother went to see him off at the train station. He was conscripted in the Russian army.
What year was that?
1940, I would say.
Whose son was Uncle Teddy?
Falke, my grandparents. So,
And tell me what you remember of your grandparents.
nothing.
Approximately how many family members would you say perished during the war?
Approximately?
Approximately.
Pertaining to mine or just all?
No, your family.
My family, I believe that 1, 2, 3, 3. My other uncle, Yankel, which my daughter was named after, he was killed by the Polacks after a dance. The 19 or 20 jumped on top of him, and they stabbed him to death. he was a very good dancer, and all the women liked dancing with him. And who survived was my mother and my Uncle Teddy.
And
And my other aunt, Sarah, she also perished. So there were
what was Teddy's last name?
Boyarsky.
Where did you live in Lida?
I could pick out, I lived 3 houses away from a creek. That's...
Did your house have a name? The street have a
I-
name where your house is?
If it did, didn't know it.
Can you describe your home?
It was like a log cabin. It wasn't a log cabin, but it was made out of wood. It was dark on the outside. Had a yard on the side, worn down picket fence in the front, and my neighbors across the street saw Esther and Ruth, the Lapidas. Maggot was the first name, I think, the last name. They lived across the street, and I remember that they used to grow sunflower seeds in their front yard. And I think we did likewise, the same thing,
Where did you sleep in the house?
in the house.
Where?
That particular night that they took my uncle out, I was laying on top of the, what do you call it, the house, top of the bed. It was a bunk bed, so I slept on top.
So who lived in the house with you then?
My mother, my grandfather, my grandmother, and my aunt.
Can you tell me the names of those people?
Falke was my grandfather. Sarah, I believe, is my aunt. My mother's younger sister, and my grandmother. At the moment, I can't think of her name, but I have pictures of them.
Perhaps
Yeah,
it'll come
yeah.
to you later. Approximately, to your best knowledge, how many Jews lived in Lida?
I have no idea.
How did the Jews and the non-Jews get along?
I think we, like in any shtetl, we lived here, they lived there, and even when you come to this country, you just don't, you move where your people are. You know, that's the way the world is, doesn't matter.
So would you describe Lida as just different sections?
Well, I remember the downtown area was a couple of buildings and the stores, brick building. And right a block past that on the left, it was the market. You know, it's a strange, in 1921, the town of Lida was controlled by the Russians. And in 1939, it was controlled by Poland. So the same people, they spoke Russian and they spoke Polish. But as far as, you know, most of the Polacks in the early years, as I recall, weren't very favorable to Jews. I hate to say it, but that's what it is.
How did you feel that? What did you?
I didn't feel it. I only heard my parents talking, not my stepfather and because he came from Grodno, which is further west from us.
What did you hear them say?
Nothing good. I mean, that the Polacks hate Jews. That's it. Well, that's the way the world is. Everybody hates Jews. I'm still trying to find out who controls all the banks. I would go there for a loan, but they wouldn't give me any.
Tell me what you remember of the holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Passover.
We didn't have that. Not when I was born, because the Germans followed. In a short time, they'd overrun our town.
How many synagogues were in Lida?
I don't know. But I think there's one for sure now. A couple of years ago, the Rabbinical Society of I say Brooklyn, and they, I don't know how it happened, maybe they had a premonition, but somebody there always felt that there were Jews left in that town. And they sent one or two rabbis down there, and they took over a building, and they fixed it up. And from what I read was that the first week or so of service was a small turnout, 1 or 2 people, 3 people, mostly for our curiosity. A lot of people who lived in Lida knew they were Jews, but they couldn't speak Yiddish. They didn't know how to talk to anybody, and they kind of kept to themselves. And slowly, the following week, a couple of more people showed up, and a couple of more people, and the interesting thing is that 2 years ago, I went into Publix, where I live, and there was this very pretty blonde, and I have an ear for detecting where people come from by listening to their accents. And she said I said, "Where are you from?" And her husband's standing there. She says, "From Poland." I said, "Oh, I'm from Poland also." She started talking, and she says, "What part of Poland?" I said, "Lida." And she turns to me, "Oh, that's that Jewish town." My feet were off the floor. I was so excited that they referred to Lida as a Jewish town. So you have to go through wars, and you have to see people die before people
I realized that you were born in '39, and that's when the war started. What can you tell me about the danger you felt once the war started?
Well, they herded us into a ghetto, and every town had a ghetto. And my mother escaped, and she went back
Escaped where?
from the ghetto
Where was the ghetto?
in Lida. Anyway, we went back to the house. We had no place else where to go. And then the Germans came to the house, and my grandmother was holding me. And she was told with my grandfather, they were told to go to the right, and my mother was told to go to the left. And she had a fit. She started screaming and crying and laying on the floor and banging. And my kin, and the soldier said, it must have had a heart. He says, she says, my mother is holding the baby. And he says, go get her. It really didn't matter to him if we went to their way to the right or we went to the left. Eventually, we're both going to go to concentration camps, and then eventually, wind up as dog food for somebody. But we boarded the train, and I had white hair, platinum,
What kind of train was it?
a boxcar. And a couple of days on the train, and it stopped. And she knew, she had a premonition that where she was going wasn't good. So she jumped off with me on her shoulders, and she had ripped the cap off, and she started walking. She expected to be shot right away. Nobody stopped her. And then a little further down, she said, she came across 2 sentries, and one said to the other, "Oh, look, here comes the Yuda," and the other one said, no, look at the boy, he's got white hair and blue eyes." And she never turned around, she just kept walking. And then that evening, she had a $10 gold coin sewn in her lapel, and she gave it to a farmer who took us to the Partisans. Turns out to be Belsky. And that's the next chapter of our lives, with living in the woods. And the only thing I can't recall, my mother wound up with this beautiful horse. I have no idea where the horse came from, but we used to use it to cut down trees and have the horse drag it into the camp, where we shared on the main path. There was a bunch of Zimlankas on this side and a couple on this side, and it was too crowded, and there was a big pot belly, and my mother wanted to have something smaller and more, I guess, private. So she went up the hill, and she started digging the hole in the ground, all by herself, and cutting down the trees and dragging it over there, and she built a Zimlanka for us and a couple of other people. And I would go with her into the forest to pick up moss, so that we would fill the cracks in between the logs on the roof to prevent the heat from escaping or rain coming in. And that's the way it is. Actually, there was a picture taken on the cover of one of the books, and there was a stump there, and my mother hung her rifle on the wall, and I went over there to look at it. I opened up the breech, and a bullet popped up. So I said, I better close it. So I went to push the bullet down and close the breech, but it didn't happen. So I would open up the breech again, and sure enough, the bullet popped up again. But this time I thought I had it done well, so I closed it, and I pulled the trigger. Well, the rifle fired, and it went through the legs of a woman sitting on the stump. And the people were sitting over there. I didn't even know if somebody took a picture, I don't know.
So let me go back just a little bit. Tell me what year you escaped from the train.
1940.
And do you recall the name of the farmer that took the money and took you to the forest?
No,
Did you have any conversations?
no.
And tell me your first impression of getting into the forest and how many people were there?
My only impression was that my mother was there. It didn't matter to me, at that age, what does the world have? I wasn't interested. So,
For this interview, tell me the definition of Zemlanka,
of what?
where you were living.
Sri Lanka?
What's the definition?
That's I guess it's a Russian term, I think. And it's a hole in the ground, and they'll go down 4 or 5 feet, and then you cut trees 4 or 5 inches, and you would lay them short, like, this wide, and then on the other side, and you laid them down one to another, and people lined up sleeping on top of them with whatever they can get, branches or leaves or whatever. And then in the middle of the room, they had a stove with a big pot belly where they would boil water, so you could use it to wash yourself or whatever, and that's how you lived. That was Shangri-La.
How many people were there with you in that bunker?
And the first one, I think there might have been 10, 12. And in the second one, I believe there were 5 or 6, something like that.
And what do you recall of those people? How were you taken care of as an infant?
My mother used to go with the men to blow up trains and raid the farmers. And I believe that the Russians also used to bring us food. So that's how you lived.
Who cared for you while she was gone?
Nobody. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. We had a friend, Esther Rosenbaum. Her daughter, Ellen, when we lived in the first Zemlanka, in the main drag, she was standing outside, and she bent down for something, and the pot of boiling water fell on top of her head. I saw her maybe 10 years ago in New York, and she looked great. She says, "You remember that?" I said, "Yes." And she said, "No, I'm fine. You could never tell."
And once you moved to the second one, there were 6 people there.
Mhm.
Then who was taking care of you?
The same woman.
What language did you all speak in the forest?
Yiddish.
Approximately, again, how many people were in the forest with you?
I can give you a guess, maybe 1,200, little, maybe more, maybe less.
How would you describe yourself as a youngster living there?
I would look for Tevye Belsky, and every time he went to the storehouse, which is in the middle of the street or the dirt road, and the minute he would start walking over there, I would run over, salute him, and curse him out in Russian. And he used to get a kick out of it, so he would open up the supply house and cut me a piece of salami or cut me whatever. And I could have done that 15 times a day.
But you
And,
did say you only spoke Yiddish.
well, I also, some Polish, but, Russian is very, cursing is very easy to learn.
What birthdays do you remember celebrating while you were in the forest?
None. Non-existent.
So you mentioned Tuvia. Who else was in charge there?
That I don't know. The only one I know about was Tuvia, who was the Bala boss.
Describe him to me.
He was a nice man, yeah. And he would come to our house in Brooklyn, once a month, every 2 months with his wife. And my mother would make schmaltz herring with boiled potatoes and a bottle of vodka on the table.
Tell me about him during the war.
He was a nice person. He saved a lot of people, saved a lot of Jews. And I have no idea of the politics of the camp. I saw the movie, and halfway through the movie, they showed a plane bombing us. I can't ever recall being bombed by an airplane. That's something that Hollywood, I think, put in. But I used to play with snakes. And I would go into the forest with a stick. And in the summer months, I would find snakes crawling, and I would pick them up and drape them over a low branch on a tree. And then I had no idea if there were poisonous snakes or none. And then when the weather got cooler, that was my enjoyment. Those were my friends, and I would do the same thing, but the snakes would disappear. And I just couldn't understand. Somebody stole my snakes. And what happened was that the snakes, in the cold weather, they kind of slowed down, and they fell off, and they crawled slowly to where they came from, and that was it. And then one day, I looked up, and there was this chestnut horse, like a mirror. It was so bright and shiny and everything, and I knew it was a Russian soldier on top of the horse, and there were men behind him. And he saw me, and he said something to me in Russian, and I responded, and I ran over to him, and he picked me up, and he put me on his horse. And I remember riding all around the camp, and I came back to him, and that was it.
Who was he?
He was a Russian major. It turned out to be Jewish. And they were chasing the Germans, and the Germans happened to stumble across our camp, and they killed 4 or 5 of our partisans in the camp, and there were 3 Germans were caught, and the people tied them up, spread eagle on the, and they tried to get horses to to step on top of them, but they wouldn't. They would step over. And then all of a sudden, I was standing on the right-hand side. The crowd was oval, and I was in the far end, and I saw people coming over and cutting a piece of the ear, and I said, this is for my mother, this is for my father, this is for my children. And then when my mother saw me, she chased me away, so I ran around the other end of the circle, and they continued, and then finally she said, that's it, come on, and took me away.
How old were you?
3, 4,
How did that affect you watching that?
not at all.
What other violence were you witnessing as a child?
Nothing that I can recall right now, but that was the biggest. I couldn't associate the difference between a German and a Polish soldier or a Jewish soldier or American. They were soldiers.
And what did you think soldiers meant?
I didn't. They meant nothing to me. I was 4 years old. What did I know about the world? The first time in Austria, there was I came out of my first grade Hebrew school.
When was this?
This was after the war, in 1947, 46, 47. And I stepped out of the school, and there was several Army trucks rolling by, and the last truck had African Americans in the back, and it turns out American uniforms. I had no idea that there were people different colored than white.
And so, did you ask your mother about it?
Never said a word. I just saw it, and that's it.
While you were in the forest, how many children were there?
I couldn't tell you. I couldn't. The mothers watched the kids. It was, as I got older, I realized that a lot of the single women who had children were looking to find partners so that other men wouldn't annoy them and pester them, and that's what they did. We had friends that we met in the woods, a fellow by the name of Moshe. I pointed it out to my daughter. He was married and had 2 kids with this woman, and he was like, became insane that he thought that she was going out with other men. She didn't, but that was in his head.
So how many babies were born while you were in the woods?
I have no idea.
What contact did you have with anybody that was living outside in the little towns?
Me personally, none.
You mentioned that your mother went out and did some sabotage. Can you tell me what you know about that?
Well, she would go with the men to blow up trains, raid farmers, bring everything back. We also had a friend by the name Lamai Pasuda, who survived and lived with his German wife, who swore that she was Jewish. For 60 years, he lived in Chicago. And the reason they call him Lamai Pasuda is because he was a wild guy, and he blew up a train. The train was loaded with dishes. So they called him Lamai Pasuda. That was his nickname for the rest of his life.
Does that translate into?
Something with broken dishes. So
How many people do you keep in contact with that were in the forest with you?
nobody. I keep in contact, I try to anyway, with my neighbor's son who lives out in Long Island, Jackie Lapidus, and his and the other sister's son, Jackie Maggot, who lives on the west coast of Florida. But other than that, there's nobody.
While you were in the forest, Mr. Blankfeld, how many times did you have to move from your bunker?
we only did it, actually once. We moved into one, and then a year or so later, we moved in, my mother built her own, so that was it.
Do you recall any time where you had to hide other than in your bunker because there was an enemy coming towards you?
No, the only enemy that we encountered at that time was when the Russian soldiers were chasing the Germans, and that some of them came across our camp, and they killed 5 or 6 of our people, and we killed a couple of theirs and caught 3 Germans. That's the only time. Other than that,
And when you caught the Germans, when the people in the forest caught the Germans, what did they do to them?
well, they were having a picnic. They would cut a piece of ear, or cut a piece of the nose, or a piece of the lip, for my mother, for my brother, for my son, for my sister. You know, I was young, but the people who were the adults, they saw what happened to their family members. One thing, in Poland, one Jew was faster than a telegram. One would tell the other to another to another. My uncle was taken out in the middle of the night by the Russian soldiers. He was wounded. He got hit in the left arm with a dum-dum bullet that hits you and explodes. And he escaped from the hospital in Russia, and he joined my mother in the partisan camp.
Which uncle was that?
My Uncle Teddy. He was the youngest of the family. And not only was he an uncle, he was like a friend of mine. He would teach me everything and tell me and show me, and it was just,
Tell me what he taught you and what he showed you.
no, you don't want to know. I can't.
What do you remember about your daily activities?
My daily activity was getting up, going outside to see if Tuvia was near the storehouse. And if he was, I'd make a mad dash to him and salute him and curse him out in a couple of words that I knew at the time. And he would open up the shed and cut me something, and that was it. And then I would go and play with snakes, or follow my mother with the horse to go wherever she had to do.
Where did you keep the horse?
She had it tied up outside.
And what kind of food did you eat while you were there? How
Would
was it supplied?
It was either what we raided from the trains, from the farmers, or what the Russians would bring to us to help to keep us alive. We were a front for them. We fought. We held the Germans at bay as much as we could. It wasn't an overwhelming army, but our men did well.
How far away was the Russian camp?
I don't know. I have no idea.
So what did you know about what was raging with war and what was happening to the other Polish people and the Belarusians?
I never thought about it. All I know was that my mother once told me that my uncle Yankel was killed by the Polish guys, and they don't like Jews, and that was it. So
How old were you when you found out the war was over?
Around 4.
And how were you told?
Well, my mother told me, and then we started going back to the town to the shtetl that we came from.
And what did you find when you got there?
We found nothing. I mean, the house was run down. My grandfather was a jeweler, and I don't remember this, but my mother and my uncle started digging in the yards for coffee cans because he used to, he buried before the war scrap pieces of whatever he had. And evidently somebody saw him do it, and when we came back, we dug up the whole, they dug up the whole yard, and there was nothing there. So somebody saw them and dug it up, and that was the end of that. And then it wasn't, it was an unfriendly situation, I guess, when you came out of the woods and you go back to your shtetl, and it's not the same. So we migrated from Lida to Lodz, which is a large city, and we lived there, and we met other people, and we signed up with this, I think it was UNRWA, and we were, there might have been maybe 80 or 90 people, and we marched into, hiked, I shouldn't say march, we hiked into Czechoslovakia. I remember sleeping in a synagogue on a concrete floor, very uncomfortable. And we left, and then
How long did you stay there?
one night.
What was the condition of the people that were with you?
Everybody was the same, bewildered, shocked, amazed, scared. And in any event, we did what everybody else did. We hiked across into Austria, and we wound up in a place called Bad Gastein, which is a ski resort in Austria. And they put us up in 2 buildings.
Who was in charge of this group then?
I believe it was UNRWA, I'm not sure, but and so we stayed there 2 years.
What were the conditions that you lived under?
It was, boy, it was wonderful. All you had to do was somebody said, well, Hitler used to stay there. You know, that made it okay. If Hitler can stay there, that's good for us. And of course, when I didn't eat, my mother would scare me with witches and everything. And one day I was in the hotel lobby, it was around 5 o'clock, and then they had the grand stairwell, the staircases leading up to the second floor. It was out of Hollywood. It was just unbelievable. And 3 women with robes come into the lobby, and I saw them, and I'm looking around, there's nobody else, and I started screaming and crying. I thought they were witches. I ran upstairs, I was knocking on doors, and nobody was opening the door. I thought I was gonna die, and then somebody opened the door, and it turned out they were nuns. This is all the years of my mother scaring me with witches because I didn't want to eat.
And what kind of education was provided to you, either in the camps or once you left the camp?
I had no education once we were out of Bad Gastein, Austria, where I was in first grade. Nothing in the next couple of years in Italy. My next school was when I came to the United States, and by my mother's uncle who sponsored us to come here.
Where did you attend first grade?
In Austria, Bad Gastein.
And describe the school and the students in the school?
They were all refugees like I was. Most of them spoke Yiddish, some spoke whatever country they were from, Romania, Hungarian.
And what were you taught in the first grade?
Well, I wasn't the greatest student in the world. I was taught math, I remember. And 1, 2, 3, 4, and 2. I got to 2, and then I understood that part. And then a week or so later, we got to 11, and that got me a couple of slaps in the head. 1 and 1, I couldn't, it's 2. I said, yeah, but you told me this was 2. So then, get it.
And how long were you in that school?
A short time, because within 2 years we migrated to Italy. We crossed either the Austrian Alps or the Italian Alps, depending on what side of the mountain you're on. And we came down to Milan, and then by train we wound up in Anzio. We lived there for about 2 years, no, a little less than 2 years, right on the beach. And from there we went to Salerno, which was further down the coast, right past the Amalfi Coast to Salerno. We lived there in Quonset huts, right on the beach, the Army oval metal shirts.
And who were the people that were with you? Were these the same?
Basically the same
90
people.
people?
Yeah. Everybody wanted to come to either the U.S., and in 1947, 48, you couldn't come here. I don't want to say anything bad about Roosevelt. I like the man, but with his administration, they didn't allow Jews to come to the United States. It wasn't until Harry Truman took over that he changed the laws. I don't want to discuss politics here, but we came to this country. I spoke no English, 3 words, yes, no, and shut up. My mother and father certainly didn't speak any, and we were sent to our relatives who qualified us to come to Minneapolis, Minnesota.
You just mentioned mother and father.
Yes,
When did your mother meet her second husband?
in Lodge. That's where I refer to my father.
Tell me about their meeting and his name.
David Blankfeld.
When was he born?
He was born in Grodno, Poland, closer to the German border, and
What year?
1916, I believe, December 28th, maybe, something in December.
How did they meet?
I have no idea. But they went out, and then they went out again, and then that was it.
When did they get married?
I think in 1940, 46, 47, 46. Yeah. He was a good man. He was a very a timid individual. He had a nice smile on his face, dark complexion, and very nice.
And what was his experience during the war?
He was he, his brother and father were in the famous hotel called Auschwitz. His father died there. His brother died there. And he survived. How he did it, I have no idea. But towards the end of the war, when the Germans were petrified of the Russians, absolutely petrified. And he told me that one day that he came out and there were no guards in the camp, and the gate was open, and the three guys walked out, and I'm sure that the other people who were able to walk followed after that. And the bottom line was we wound up going to the United States. Another guy went to the United States in years after, and then one guy went to Uruguay.
Who were these guys?
I can only Shepsel was one. He was a toughie, a tough guy.
Is that his first name or his last name?
Shepsel,
His first name?
yeah. I don't know his last name, I don't remember it. And then the other guy went to Uruguay. And then my father met my mother, and they went, and we actually signed up to go to Israel because we couldn't come to this country.
I noticed while you moved your arm, you have a number on your arm. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, can I do politics a little bit? I have no, when Donald Trump made his famous speech on his balcony in his office building that some of the neo-Nazis are fine people. Well, my brother and I were in his house in Long Island, and he said, we looked at each other, and he says, I'm buying. And I knew exactly what he meant, and he took me to a tattoo parlor. And this is my father's Auschwitz number.
Can you tell me what it is?
Well, this is the number that the Germans tattooed on him,
Tell
and
me
on
the
the
number.
bottom,
Tell me the number.
a diamond, a red diamond, a 9, a 0, a 6, a 2, and a 5. And underneath, I put never again. And
So now your mother is married to David Blankfeld,
right,
and she got married where?
in Lodz, Poland.
Can you tell me what you remember of that day?
Nothing. For young kids, I don't know how it is with women or girls. With men, it's a little different. We don't know from people getting married and doing all these things and going here and doing that. You know, all I know was that they went out one night, and I couldn't stop crying. I thought she was leaving me, and I was being babysat by somebody, and I cried the whole night until they came back. So, you know, that's the tough guy that I was.
And what children were born to them as a couple?
Yeah, well, in 1947, my brother Joel was born, in Bad Gastein, Austria. And when we finally moved from Minneapolis, Minnesota to Brooklyn, my mother had a relative, Morris, in the Bronx. He was the nicest person in the world. Whatever he told my mother in a letter is exactly what he followed through with. His wife had passed away. He lived by himself. He was a carpenter. And he promised my father to come to New York. He was going to get him a job in his place, and he's going to help him find an apartment. And he did that.
And what was his name?
I forgot. Morris. And he named me Melvin. So it was a choice between Martin and Melvin. So he chose Melvin, that was it. And then, of course, Jerry Lewis made it famous on TV back in the 50s. And
So let's go back now, let's go back to where you left off in Salerno.
mhm.
And Quonset huts provided by the U.S. Army?
Wasn't the Army, it was this organization. It's either UNRWA or I can't recall right now, but it was an organization that moved us from one country to another country.
And who provided food and clothing?
The clothing we had,
From where?
well, you know, I'd never even thought about that. But I know that they used to serve us rations in the cans. And in Salerno, at the age of 8, I would go to a market and sell the cans to the Italian for a quarter. Sorry. Anyway, sorry. So that was the,
So you'd sell them the rations?
I would sell the rations and give my parents the quarter or the whatever it was, Italian lira.
And how about the clothing? Where were you getting clothes to wear?
Clothing, I believe they supplied, you know.
When you were in the forest, in the camps, how did you keep warm? What clothes did you have to keep warm?
Whatever we had. I mean, Poland is not a warm place either.
Yeah,
So-
where did you get the clothes at that time?
That's what we had. We came with the clothing on our backs. And that's how we lived. You know, you didn't change your shirt every day or once a week. You just, every so often.
And now what year are you in Salerno?
I'm sorry?
What year were you in Salerno?
1947, 48, 49, 1947. Something in the middle of 1947. And then we moved to Castel Gandolfo, which is, it's like living on the edge of Lake Tahoe, if you've never been there. We were in a house, 3 or 4 families, overlooking, on top of the mountain, overlooking the lake below. and they had a driveway that took you down to the road uh, this way and that way, and you could have taken two cars at the same time. It was so big and wide, it was unbelievable. And almost every house had a dry marble swimming pool. Marble, slabs of marble that were just fit, you know, what did I know about construction at the time? But it was just pretty. No water, but it was beautiful. And that's where we lived, and who wanted to move from there, from any place? But it was like heaven.
Well, who were the other families living with you?
One family was the lady Esther Brosman and her husband Roma. They lived in Massachusetts, and she was the one who taught me how to tell time. Also from she was more closer to Russia than she was to Poland, but she spoke Mama Russian. So that's.
And the other two families were?
I don't remember the other two families. They were there, but I liked her because she was very nice, and eventually she had a daughter.
And tell me about your little brother.
My little brother was born in Brooklyn, New York, and
Let's go back to the older brother then. I'm sorry. The
Oh.
one that, the one that was born in,
Austria.
yeah.
Yeah, Joel. That's my middle brother. I went back when my wife was alive. We went back to every year we would travel all around Europe, and then one day I decided to go to Austria to show her where I used to live. And for me, it was something, because the minute it has anything to do with Germans, my heart, and it just like this. Anyway, I fought it off, and I drove there. We took a train and went through tunnels, and from France to Austria, and I found the place. Actually, I drove by it. It's like an out of the way, off to the side of the main road that you're going on. And I went past about a mile and a half, and I said, no, this is not it. I made a U-turn, and sure enough, I went down a mile and a half, and I made a right turn, and that was the main street in Bad Gastein, with a couple of fancy hotels. And we were on the far end, and on the before you cross, there was a church over there, but we were in the hotel on the left-hand side. It's a hotel that was empty, no clients except for us. And there was a waterfall that came from the top of the mountain underneath the road and down there. And in the winter months, I got very cold, and I got my tongue stuck in the metal. And it ripped up my tongue. But
I was asking you about Joel and what you remember.
and Joel was born in that house, and
And
that's
how
it.
was that for you, having a little brother?
Great. I used to babysit him, and then when the other one was born, when we came to this country, I was a proud older brother. I used to beat up the middle one because he was beating up the smaller one. Not to hurt him, but he's a little guy. He was only 6'3", the middle one.
So now tell me about your trip to the United States. When did you leave? And where were you when you left?
We sailed from Naples, Italy, on a ship called Marine Jumper. Wasn't Queen Mary or any of the modern cruisers. It was maybe 200 feet long. And as soon as it was in November, and as soon as we sailed out of the Rock of Gibraltar, the Mediterranean, into the North Atlantic, I don't know what happened. God must have been mad at us. We got hit with a storm, and my father was laying on the deck. He couldn't move. He was leaning against the back wall, and he used to say to me, "Oh, Auschwitz wasn't like this. Auschwitz was better than this is." We were being tossed around, and it's the first time on a ship, and it was unbelievable. And then finally, on the third day, when it went down, the day after, we got hit with another storm. So, and my brother got his toe caught in a door, swinging door, and he got stitches in it. The door should have been closed, and it wasn't, and he was a kid. So that was it.
How many other survivors were on the ship with you?
I probably would say somewhere around 150. When we sailed into the harbor in New York, I was on the starboard side, and I was looking by this shining building, white building in the distance, but there was nobody else on the ship on my side. And I couldn't understand where all the people were, why they weren't here. I'm looking at a building, and every so often when you get closer, you see a car passing by. Turned out to be the Bell Parkway. And the bottom line was that they were on that side of the ship, on the starboard side, on the port side. They were looking at the Statue of Liberty, and I was, looking at Bush Army Terminal. So,
What was the date?
November 21st, 1949. I can't forget that.
What was your first impression?
Of the U.S.? You go from one country to another, you just don't think about it. It wasn't until we were driven by taxi from Uncle Morris, who picked us up, and we took the train to Minneapolis, Minnesota.
What was Uncle Morris's last name?
If I started digging, I would find it. That's 70 years ago. I don't remember.
Was Uncle Morris married?
No, he was, but his wife had passed away.
How old a man was he?
He was in the early 60s, maybe late 50s. But they don't make him like that anymore.
And so now, how long did you stay in New York?
A week. We stayed with him for 1 week, and then we took the train to Minneapolis, Minnesota. And by the time we went there, my mother's uncle had died, and the wife was alive and with her children. And out of that whole family, the oldest son, Arthur, was a marvelous person. He took a liking to us, and he took care of us, and he did everything. He got my father a job in their business as a carpenter. I remember they paid him $45 a week, and the first month's rent was $45. So in Naples, I found a little tobacco pouch with 16 $1 bills, and I thought I was the richest man in the world. I was just amazing. And I gave it to my father, and he was shocked. You know, did you steal this? Did you rob this? No, it's laying in the street. And that's the only money that we had. So aside from him working for the week, he got paid, and we had to pay the rent. So
How soon after you arrived in Minneapolis was your other brother born?
my other brother wasn't the youngest one. He wasn't born until we moved to Brooklyn.
So let's go back to Minneapolis and tell me what happened there. How long did you stay there?
We stayed there 5.5 months. Only reason is that we were getting ready to move, and I came down with the mumps. So they had to keep me at home. And then my father wasn't happy there. My mother wasn't happy there. We also had the son-in-law of my Arthur's sister Sylvia, Sam. We were blessed with having relatives like that up there. And Sylvia's other brother, Martin, he could care less. He paid no attention to us. And but that was it. We weren't mad at anybody. They were nice. We just weren't happy there. So
So you said the rent was $45 a month.
right.
Describe where you lived.
It was a beautiful Victorian house on a corner with a wraparound porch and hip roofs, gable roofs all over on every side. It was beautiful. I went back years later, and that house was demolished, and it was the same address, but a different house.
What was the address?
1714 Thomas Place. And if you go to, when you pull into any state, when you go ask information about that, they tell you it doesn't exist. There's no such place as Thomas Place in Minnesota or Minneapolis, and they were wrong and I was right. So,
You were only there for a short time?
yeah.
And how did you decide where you wanted to go? And how did you get there?
Train. My Uncle Morris kept writing letters and he wouldn't give up. And when my mother and father decided that they have to go, it's a little bit different when you go to a state where you just got relatives and there are no your kind of people except for the relatives. It's different. And when you come to New York or Brooklyn, he got us an apartment in a section called Brownsville. Brownsville had nothing but either Murder Incorporated or just regular residents, Jewish people who lived there, and they worked and they ate and they went shopping there. That's the difference. Everybody who comes to this country, they all tend to stick to their own kind until they learn the ways of America. So,
And how did you learn the ways of America?
it's a great country. Someday some of the people are going to wind up and say that the Constitution of the United States is the greatest thing that's ever been invented. Not Ford, not GM, not anybody can ever come up with another Constitution. And if you don't have that type of system in your country, you're going to have a dictator. And I don't want to mention any names. And tried living under a dictator. You know,
When did you have additional schooling?
in Minneapolis, I was put into the 4th grade. And I spoke just 3 words. Actually, one I dropped immediately. They said, "Shut up." So, and they put a girl by the name of Stephanie Greenberg. And she was so pretty that every time she grabbed me behind the screen, my heart was... And she was teaching me behind a screen in the back of the class. And she told me where she lived, and then when I came out of school, I'd walk around the corner down the hill to look where she was waiting for me in the window. But that romance didn't last long. So that was the 4th grade. Now we moved to New York, and they put me in the 5th grade. And 6 weeks down the road, it was summer vacation. So we took a hiatus for the summer, and when I came back, they put me in the 6th grade. So I was well educated of nothing. And I once wrote a essay about in public school. Mr. Hamburg, he was also my art teacher. And I wrote about my English was so great that I this and I that and I this and the Germans did this and the Nazis did this and that. He was so overtaken that he gave me a certificate. I mean, my English wasn't anything. It wasn't anything that I knew how to spell or write, but the Nazis and this and that, and he was overwhelmed. So he gave me a certificate, and then later on, when I got to the 6th, in the end of in the 6th grade, he was my art teacher, and he took a liking to me. That was it. But so my education went from 4th grade to 6th grade, and not speaking English. It was a hassle. In the 4th, 5th, and 6th, they were talking about fractions. I couldn't understand it, and after I graduated, I taught myself later in life fractions. I had to. Was a construction superintendent. I didn't know.
So how many grades did you complete?
3 years in high school, and 2 years in public school. Oh, I'm sorry, 3 years in junior high school, and 1.5 years in public school.
What was your father David's occupation?
He was a carpenter. And, sorry.
Where did he find work in New York?
My mother's uncle, Morris, promised him a job at his place if he came to New York. And he lived up to it. He got my father a job. And my mother went to school for 6 months in the evening to learn English. He started, but he had to drop out. He didn't quite understand. But when he started working, my mother would write down the address on a piece of paper, and he would go to the subway, at the bus station, depending on where we lived. And he would go over to somebody and say, Mr. Please, and they would read it, and if they knew, they would tell them, you gotta take the bus to the subway, and then they take the subway to Harlem, or to Queens, or to wherever. He did it, he did the work, and he would come back. Cold, winter, it didn't matter. He had a 90-pound toolbox that he carried with him. And he did it. And I sometimes I get outspoken, but I hear people coming to this country, they only want to live a better way of life. Wherever they are is not good. They want to live a better way of life. And it's all you ever hear, including my own Jews, who used to tell me and my father, oh, you're stealing our job. You're stealing our job. Here's a 90-pound toolbox. Go do this. I don't want to do that. I don't want to work so hard. What the hell are you complaining about? We have people coming from South America and Central America and all over. You want to cut grass in the summer months in Florida? You live in a development. Who cuts the grass for you? It's just people. Why can't the world understand? And by the way, my African or black friends, including some of my doctors, they call me a Jamaican. I've got a lot of friends in Miami and in Fort Lauderdale that if I knew how to make, I would have them in my house anytime. They're no different. They're no different. Why does the world have to? I've gone through my early stages in life at just 73, 74 years in the United States, and I see the politicians every 4 years, the same lines, they keep repeating what the previous administration did, what the previous president did, what this one did. Something new, something do for the people.
So when was your youngest brother born? Let's go back to that.
Okay, my youngest brother was born, I think, in 1954. At that time, it was called Bethel Hospital on Linden Boulevard in Brownsville.
And his name?
Sorry?
His name?
Philip Blankfeld. And now we were a family of 5. It was an accident, is what they told me. But he was a Blankfeld. That was it.
And what was your occupation once you became able to work?
Believe it or not, a friend of the family hired me, and I became a kosher butcher. So I used to travel from Brooklyn on train to Jackson Heights, or if my father didn't use the car, I would take the car and drive to Jackson Heights. And I was a kosher butcher. And then after a couple of years, I just, crazy hours, get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you go to the slaughterhouse, meet him, and go to the slaughterhouse with him, and he would buy meat for the week, and then Later that day, they would bring the forequarter, the upper portion of the cow either side. And then you break it, so you have to cut, and you cut the arm over here is very, no solid meat. It's not, no fat in there, because
How did you learn how to be a butcher?
he taught me. And you gotta, I don't want to give away family secrets, but, you know, he was a nice religious man, but like anybody else, you know, Geld is the important thing.
What was his name?
Well, I know he's dead. Philip, that's it, I won't say it. He was a nice man, and when young women would come in with their carriages and they would say, one wanted to show off in front of the other, and it was really hysterical. And they would say, I want 4 prime rib steaks. So, oh, if I have rib steaks for you, he would go into the cooler, and come out with 4 rib steaks. He said, look at this. Wonderful, wonderful. And then all of a sudden they would say, oh, can you grind this up? I better stop here.
And tell me, you told me that your wife had passed.
Yes.
Tell me about your wedding, your marriage, how you met.
Years ago, I came to Florida on vacation. My friend and I, he just moved down 4 months ago to Florida with his wife. And we, can I mention the name? Okay, it was the Surf Coma Hotel. We used to go there for years, sometimes 2 guys, sometimes 8 people, sometimes 6, depending on who could get off at that time. And we would take over the hotel. Not bad, just, you know, they liked us being there because we would help the manager control the place. So one year, just the 2 of us came down, and I was dating an airline stewardess for Eastern at the time, and she had moved down. She lived next street from me in Brownsville. And I was dating her, and then when I came, the first night I came, I came to the hotel room very late, and at 7 my friend woke me up, and I said, no, I just came in, let me get another hour's sleep, I'll go down. I just saved me a lounge chair. He says, okay. I couldn't go back to sleep, so I put a bathing suit on and I went down there. And I sat down next to him, and all of a sudden I look across the pool, and there's this girl that looks at me, but when I look back, she turns away. And now she's looking at me, and then I see that, and I turn away. So this went on for a while, and I said, Phil, who's that girl over there? He says, oh, that's Marsha. I said, Marsha? What do you mean, Marsha? Where'd you meet her? He says, yesterday. I have a date with her tonight. And so that was it. That evening, they had gone out. They met in my hotel in the lobby. I was there, and we were talking, and they went out. And then about 40 minutes later, they came back. I said, what happened? It's a quick date. She says, well, she wanted to be with you. So I wasn't, I went out with her for the rest of the week, and I told her that I had to go back to New York to work, and she said, okay, but just stop off at my job and say goodbye. So I said, okay. So I went by to Howard Johnson. She was a waitress. I went by Howard Johnson's, and I said goodbye, and she started crying, and anyway, my friend takes me towards the airport. He says, Mel, I know you don't want to go, but I'm getting closer to the airport. Make up your mind. And finally, he turned around on his own, and he took me back to the place. And when I went inside, she was carrying stuff on the tray, and when she saw me, she dropped the whole tray and on the floor, and she ran, and she cried, and she was so happy. And so I went back 2 days later, and 2 days after that, she came to New Jersey. She said, I love you, I want to marry you, can you pick me up at Newark Airport? So we did that, and we spent the whole night in Colby Diner. She was proposing and proposing and proposing, and finally talked me into it.
So when did you get married? What was the date?
August 27th, and
What year?
67.
And her name? Marcia?
Marcia.
Last name?
Her maiden was Graham. And it turns out that her father was related to my friend Joe Katz, who lives in Wellington, to his mother. So
Can you spell her last name?
Graham, Kraham. And that
And how many children were born to your marriage?
there were 2, but one she lost at the beginning. And then my daughter was born prematurely. She had a hard time carrying to term, and then a couple of years later, my son was born.
Their names?
Paul Blankfeld,
And your daughter's name?
Julie Blankfeld. She was named after my uncle Jack.
And how many grandchildren do you have?
2,
Their names?
Madden and Sawyer,
And how old are they?
12 and 10. Great kids, the best in the world. They're
How often do you speak about your wartime experiences?
How often? Not often. There's nobody to talk to. People don't understand, I can't understand, this is people that you bump into. I can't understand why the Jews didn't fight back. I just, why didn't we fight back? Oh, there wasn't enough of us. We didn't have the weapons, but just the mentality of some people, and those already know about the war. Majority of people, this number, they have no idea. It's amazing. It just,
You did tell me that Marcia did pass away.
yes,
How long ago?
about 14 years ago.
What was the date?
Marsha's date, look at this. You caught me off guard. No, I don't.
How many nightmares do you continue to have about what happened during the war?
None. I don't have any nightmares. The only thing that I have is after my wife died, I had a dream that she fell off the bed into a hole, and I was reaching across the bed to try to pull her out. And the further I went down, the deeper she went down. And that was like a nightmare for me, and every so often I get that same dream that keeps popping up. So
What do you think that signifies?
I have no idea. So I'm not the best sleeper in the world either. I don't know other people, but I'm awful.
How was your faith in God affected by what you experienced?
With all the praying that I did in my life, and I don't see I'm a Jew. I'll be a Jew for the rest of my life. I want my daughter and my son and my grandkids to be Jews for the rest of their life, and on and on and on. But if there is a God in this world, he must be hiding from us, or at least from me. I pray and I pray and I pray, and nothing happens. Nothing.
What are you praying for?
I pray for when my mother was sick. I pray for my wife when she was sick. I also offered my lungs and any part to save her life in Sylvester Center. And nothing has changed. You pray all you want, but somebody takes her away. But I'm Jewish. I'll always be a Jew.
What are your feelings towards the European continent? Germans, Polish, Ukrainians, wherever the war was. What are your
Well,
feelings about that?
okay. The Ukrainians in the 1800s, when the Cossacks used to raid the little shtetls and kill the farmers, the Jews, I hated them. And I used to root for the Russians because they saved our life in the woods. If it wasn't for the Russians, we all would have been dead. We also sent them information on where the Germans were and you know, their locations and everything, but which is a minor. I didn't learn this in history. This is my own personal thinking. I can't. I forgot the train of thought.
My question was, what are your feelings towards the Europeans?
The Europeans, Spain, I never went to Spain because I always felt that they were Arabs and without robes. And at one time, I know that the Arabs didn't like me as a Jew, and I definitely didn't like them as a Jew.
What was your experience with them?
No experience, just personal feeling. I never wanted to go to Spain because to me Spain and Portugal didn't do well with Jews. I always liked Germany. I did go one time. I took a shortcut, an hour drive from one tip of Germany. My wife was screaming. My body was, I can't explain, I was just floating. I hated it. My blood pressure must have gone through my head. I couldn't believe it. My body was shaking, but I had to try to prove to myself that I can go. And now I ask what does a Jew see by going, the younger Jews, they go in business or whatever. But me, as an old man who lived through what Germany did to us, I find it, I just can't do it. I did it once. My wife was insane that I did it. I don't care if it takes us 5 years to get to Netherlands. I don't care if it does the, turn around. You're not gonna make it to the other side. I'm sorry. If you're older than me and you're German, I can tolerate. If you're younger than me and you're German, I don't like you at all because you were part of the hatred group that killed Jews. The younger ones, they got caught up with it. They don't. I'm talking about the people in the 40s and 50s. But if you're 70, 80, 90,
How do you think we should respond to genocide and human rights violations today?
I think you should go after anybody that kills. Like I just heard last night on the news, this head of a large country was stealing children from the parents in Ukraine and putting them with his country's other families. How do you do that? How do you steal somebody's kids and put them with somebody else? What type of people are we? What type of world do we live in? That's not what I raised my kids. I went through hell. I certainly don't want them, and I don't want my grandkids to go through something like that. It's crazy. What kind of world are we living in? In Israel now, they decided it seems like they want to do away with their constitution. And they're setting themselves up with a dictator like Netanyahu. I had to mention the name.
Are you optimistic about Israel's future?
When I hear stuff like that, I am, because Israel is based on democracy.
So what do you think will happen with Netanyahu?
I think he ought to hold hands with somebody from this country and jump off the pier.
What can we do to fight hate and racism and bigotry and intolerance? What can we do?
I'm sorry. Well, if I knew that answer, I'd be the wealthiest politician. I don't know. I just can't understand that after years and years and years, and the last century, we've been persecuted from the beginning of time. France was the first country that allowed college students to enter college, if I'm not mistaken, in the 1700s. Nobody, I don't know, I check myself. I don't have any pimples, and I shower every morning. I shave, I wash my hair, I brush my teeth, whatever I have left. For God's sakes, are we different? We don't own the banks. That's all I ever heard. Oh, by the way, when you're in Europe and you know you're coming to the United States and the people know about it, they say, oh, America, oh my God, there's money growing on trees and gold in the streets. Well, when you come here, if you want to eat, you better get a job. There are no, a tree grows in Brooklyn, but he never found $1 on it. And you can trip over any cobblestone in the city, but it'll never be gold. So if you want to live, you got to eat. But some people don't. It's so easy to hate other people. I can't understand it. How can you be a human being and just hate, and hate?
So what's the answer?
I don't have an answer. Yes, I do, but I can't say it.
Education is important.
No, you can't. You know, years ago, my wife and I went skiing to Idaho. And when she made reservations, she befriended this woman on the phone. And she sounded very nice, and she was nice. And we went up there skiing. Sun Valley, Idaho. I fell in love. I loved the music from the 40s and Glenn Miller and Harry James and Benny Goodman. And then they're going to Sun Valley, Idaho, and they're on a horse and buggy sled, and they're whipping, and the music, and and then Sonia Honey skating at an ice rink, and I said, I got to go see where Sonia Honey skated. So we went there. It turns out that the movie was made in Hollywood. There's not even anything that says Sonia Honey, but it just, oh yeah, we went out one night with the lady and her husband, and they live,
Which lady?
the one that my wife made a reservation with, that we met up and where they worked and lived. And I happened to mention something about being Jewish. And I look at her face. It was an immediate rejection. And turns out that her husband and the brother and the whole gang in that area of the country are all Nazi supporters. My wife couldn't see it. I said, Marcia, take a look at her. Rose will never go out with you because you're a Jew. Can't you understand that? She couldn't accept that. But the truth was, that's exactly what it was. From that moment on, she never called us, she never did this. The United States.
How do you think the experience that you had as a youngster, living in the forest, living with the threat of the Nazis invading the forest, affected your life as an adult now? How did your experiences affect the person you are?
It didn't affect me at all because now, as I got older, I fight back. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that or if it's okay to say it.
Fight back in what way?
Any possible way that I can. Okay, I used to to this, I stay away from places that I know that don't like Jews. I try to eliminate problems, but in case I run into a problem,
What contact did you have with the Belskis after the war?
he used to come to the house,
Who?
Tevye, with his wife. Once a month, once every 2 months. And every time he looked at me, he would smile. And, and they would sit down at the table, and another 2 couples, and they would sit, and, and I would run to Belmont Avenue and buy schmaltz herring, and my mother would boil potatoes, and my friend Joe owned the liquor store 2 blocks away, and so they had a good time. That's the way it was in the old country.
What contact did you have with the other brothers?
None. Not at all. I have no... I wasn't, at my age, I wasn't involved with politics. Who knew? I didn't know the difference between A and B. All I knew was this is a man that opens up the warehouse for me, a storehouse, and cuts me a piece of salami or whatever,
Is
No.
there anything more you would like to add that I have neglected to ask you?
No, that's it.
And I want to say thank you. Thank you for myself, thank you on behalf of the Shoah Foundation as well.
Well, anytime.
And we're going to do pictures now.
We have a special order.
Was I,
Can you get that okay, Brad?
I can't move that clip on that side yet. Just take that off. Thank you.
Can you see the picture?
sorry?
Can you see the picture? You're going to have to describe it, who is in it.
This is my father.
His name?
Solomon Gewalt. Green,
You did say Greenspan. to me.
Greenspan, yes, but he pronounces it differently.
How does he pronounce it?
Green, it's more like a German sounding name.
Do we know where
So-
he was born?
He was born in Lida.
And how did you happen to have this picture?
My mother's friend gave it to me years ago.
Thank you.
My mother never talked about him, and I never asked her who my father was. I didn't want to embarrass her, put pressure on her.
Thank you.
Carl, maybe let's push that stand back.
So you can see it better?
Yeah. Sir, if you
Okay.
could sit back in your chair a little bit, maybe. Perfect.
Okay, this is my adopted father, David Blankfeld. This picture was taken 3 years after he get out of Auschwitz. So he looks kind of full. But
And how did you happen to have this picture?
he had the uniform with him in Austria. I'm sorry, yeah, in Austria. And he put it on and somebody took pictures of him, so he wanted to, I think the triangle means a political prisoner. They had, I think 40 some odd things that they would stick on with your number. If you were gay, lesbian, you had a different,
Symbol.
yeah.
Thank you.
Tilt it down, please.
And this picture?
This is my father and my mother in New York, and I think this was my youngest brother's bar mitzvah.
Approximately what year was that taken? About in the mid-60s. Thank you. Let's start on the top left and tell me who the people are in the picture.
Okay, the top left, this is my mother, Reva. This is my aunt, Sarah. This is my grandmother, I forgot her name already. And this is my grandfather. The two of them are inscrolled in Miami Beach in a marble plaque next to the Jackie Gleason Convention Center. And this is my Uncle Teddy. He was the youngest. And this was my other Uncle Jack that was killed by the Polacks after Verdansk.
And how do you happen to have this picture?
My cousin gave it to me in New Jersey. God.
Just glad it's not my phone.
Avi, I'll call you back.
Okay, and how did you say you happen to have this picture?
My cousin in New Jersey.
Okay, can we turn the picture around because the names are on the back, and he can name the people that were in the picture. Just name the people that are in the
Okay, there were my grandfather Falke, my grandmother Basha, where's the sister come from? Oh, Sarah was my mother's sister, and Jack was the brother. Reba was my mother, and Teddy was the youngest brother.
Thank you,
And Julie was named after Jack.
thank you. And this picture?
This picture was taken in Anzio, Italy. I was about 7 years old.
And who's the picture of, sir?
Of me.
Thank you.
Still,
Okay.
I still had some blonde hair then, a lot of it.
Let's see that.
And this picture?
That's me, this handsome guy, and fresh out of junior high school in Brooklyn.
And how old were you in that picture?
13, 14.
Thank you. And this picture?
This is my youngest brother's bar mitzvah. This is the middle brother Joe, Phil, and me. No,
In the middle is who?
Philip.
And what was the occasion?
That was his bar mitzvah.
And what year was that? How old were
Okay.
you in that picture?
Was I? I don't, 19, 20?
Thank you. And who are the people in this picture?
Okay, this is me to the right. This lady is Anya, and she's the one who taught me in Italy, in Castel Gandolfo, how to tell time. And this is my mother, and this is her daughter, Esther.
Thank you. And the people in this picture, I'm sure you can't name them all, but tell me the ones that you recall.
Okay, here I have,
That's good.
it's interesting. This is Tuvia Belsky. This is his wife. This used to be he's the husband. She was my neighbor in Lida, across the street from where we lived. She also had the rundown picket fence, and she blows sunflower seeds. And this is her sister Luba. And this is my father, and this is my mother.
And where was this picture taken?
This is somewheres in Brooklyn.
Thank you.
I don't know what kind of affair they would. Aha.
And this picture?
That's my grandkids, Madden and Sawyer.
Thank you.
It's
I'm gonna use the camera to prop that up. Okay.
No,
never
it's
mind.
good.
It's there.
And this book?
This book is called Defiance. That was a movie that was made about our lives in the woods and the Belsky's partisan group.
Thank you.
Is there a bigger picture of that picture?
There is, yes.
Let me see if I can get it. Go
Yeah, because he's in this, you're right, aren't you?
No, not in this one.
What's the other book?
These are
Well, you can get it when you turn it off.
stop. I don't even know how to turn these stupid things off.
There's like a little button over here to put it on silent.
I was born too early for this and too late.
But someone's calling, you might want to hang up. I don't know if you,
That's fine.
okay.
That's okay.
But yeah, if later on
Oh,
you're
yeah,
like,
I
what
keep
did he
forgetting.
do? Yeah, that'll, so switch that at later, otherwise your phone will just vibrate.
Where'd Julie go?
She is sitting in the break.
All right, we good with this?
I have that same picture on my cell phone.
No.
No.
We'll get your other book.
I zoomed in on it pretty well.
Okay, but he's got another book.
Yeah, you'll use that one for your.
Yeah, that picture's on the cover of the other book.
I need Julie.
Okay. Is she talking?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Then we'll have to have.
Another
We
chair.
want them together.
Another chair. Yeah.
Barbara, I'm sorry about the politics. I just, you know,
It's okay.
this is what I feel and I have to get it out.
Okay, that's fine. Now you have it. Oh,
To,
sit down. Okay.
Hello.
hi, sorry, I have
Look
to take a
familiar.
work call.
Gee, I thought there was an audience.
Julie, can I ask you to stand up just for a minute?
Oh, sure.
Thank you. Okay, now sit back down. I just scoot it back just.
Yep.
Mr. Blankfield, would you please introduce the lady next to you?
Yes, this beautiful lady is my daughter, Julie Eisenstein. Blankfeld Eisenstein.
Yes.
Thank you. How much of your father's wartime experience did he share with you, and
Ah.
when did he share it?
You know, I can't ever remember a time not knowing. My dad has had had a very close relationship with his parents, and I always remember being with them, and stories of their experience were just, it was a constant. Watching tape about the Holocaust, talking about times in the old country, asking about my grandfather's numbers on his arm. And he used to joke with me when I was a little kid that it was his phone number. And I remember asking him, but I don't know how I even knew. I was like, there's only 6 numbers. And he would joke, he's like, oh, I knew there was something wrong. They forgot one number. So yeah, but there was always a subdued sadness that you can't explain.
What questions were you able to ask, or that
Oh.
you wanted to ask, and that way he was forthcoming in telling you the answers?
You know, sometimes it wasn't about the exact answers or what was spoken as much it was the
He really didn't like to talk about it.
there wasn't a lot of conversation, right? It was a lot of suffering. I
Yeah.
just remember a lot of sadness. I remember when I was a little kid, every year my dad would go to this partisan group. They met in New York, and I think the Gramercy Hotel. And he would drag us. And we didn't know why we were there. and I didn't understand what was happening. All these older people that would go around and pinch his cheeks and go Melach, and treat him like a baby, because it was my father. And, in hushed tones, they would talk about things that were happening or things that had happened and tell stories.
Right now,
And there were moments where they would share and talk and tell me things about their experiences and, walking through the Alps and my grandmother having to carry my dad on her back because he was too young. And, if I remember the conversation that grandma wanted to put you down and something about someone holding a gun. Was there a gun?
no, that was a story. My Uncle Teddy, who threatened to shoot her if she didn't pick me up. I was a terrible kid.
I don't know if you were a terrible kid.
Yeah, and if somebody else wanted to carry me, this is leaving the woods. And there's one part in the movie where we're walking in a canal, okay? That is exactly as I remember it. In that, I wonder if they went back to capture that scene. It was exactly the way I remember it. And if somebody wanted to carry me, like Esther Rosenbaum, she would be the only one that I would allow because I saw her more than anybody else. If somebody else wanted to carry me, I'd start crying, I wouldn't stop crying. It just continuous. And then until, of course, my mother was able to catch her breath and take me back. That's the way it was.
I understand from your father that you didn't know you had a step-grandfather. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, it was really interesting. I think I was in my 30s. And we would always joke, my dad is shorter than his younger brothers significantly and significantly fairer, different coloring. And I remember being told that the man that I knew as my grandfather was actually, his stepfather. And
How did you react to that?
I remember just being stunned, surprised, shocked. I remember my grandfather was just a really gentle, calm, kind soul. And I remember loving him so much. I remember the sadness when he passed. And so.
When did he pass?
I was young. I was 8, so it was 1979. So, but I remember the feeling of loss, of sadness. I didn't feel I had the same connection to my grandmother. She was
Tough.
She was tough. She was stressed. A lot of anxiety. A lot of panic. There was a calmness to my grandfather that I never knew. But anyway, sorry, so when I found out, I wanted to know who his father was. I wanted to know information. How long did he know? And he said he never was told explicitly. It was something that he always sensed, something he always felt. And then he revealed to me that at some point, when you were a late teenager or early 20s, that he overheard in whispers my grandmother talking in confidence with another person that was visiting, something about the name Greenspan. And I always thought, I'm like, what a wild, crazy, reference. I'm like, how would I ever resource that? So anyway.
And how did you? How did you research?
So it's funny, I have been beginning to do some genealogy in the last handful of years, and always pouring through, thinking that he was from Poland, and always focusing my direction there. And it was, I think in advance of this conversation, of meeting with you, I don't know what triggered me to look on a Belarus manifest in archives. And I did. And after searching, there's so many links and so much information online. There was this link, and it was the Partisans, 1941 to 1944. That seemed like the answer. I clicked, and I put in his mother's maiden name, Boyarsky, and there popped up this name, Tunkum, right?
Yeah.
So it was crazy. I was doing this modern technology on the airplane flying
What
down.
is Tomcom?
My
Tanchum
uncle
is
Teddy.
it's Teddy in Yiddish.
So it was my uncle, my dad's uncle, and listed was his family name, his father's name, which was Falky. So when I landed, it was funny, I saw my dad literally 3 days ago and touched base, and I said, Dad, I'm like, is this your...
He kept reading
Grandfather.
Melech.
And he said, yeah. So on a whim, I reached out and put in my grandmother's first name and a little bit more information. And there were like 5 pages of information, and there, scrolling through, all of a sudden, Rivka Grinspan.
Can you spell how it's spelled?
I'm sorry, it was just very
Come on.
surprising. It was,
Yeah.
and there, the spelling is Grinshpan, Grinspan. So it's a German Yiddish, I think, dialect or name derived from. And I don't know how, but all of a sudden, underneath the listing comes the name Melech Grinspan with the date of birth of 1939, and there is a separate line with the name Solomon. And I'm like, Dad, I think I found your father's name. What I can say is that the ladies and the folks that were part of this partisan group that had been meeting for many years were very proactive. In many of my genealogy searches, I would find reference to my dad or David, his stepfather, and my grandmother with the name Blankfeld. But never other than this one had I found the Grinspan. And I think it's a testament to the direction or the influence of these partisan ladies making sure history was recorded. I feel like it was, they wanted to have that documented, and maybe they didn't, and that might be how it was accounted for. I don't know, I haven't taken it to the next level, and I intend to, but yeah, it was crazy. It was like, how is this just all of a sudden so easy after hours of searching? So it's just, yeah. And I turned to him and I'm like, he's real. It's a person, like there's a name. And I didn't get much of a response to him, and I came back and I'm like, Dad, what do you think? And he just said, I've been kind of thinking about it all day, but you didn't really say more about it. I don't know. I know you were super close to David, and he was a wonderful father to you, and you adored him as if he was blood, but I don't know. It's
In your research, does it state where he was killed or anything about his death?
there was no information. There was actually some information listening to his father, I think. Someone had kind of left a little note, and it was more just that there was came from I think a town in Russia. That again, more research that needs to be done. So
They talk about transgenerational trauma.
yes,
Can you tell me how that has affected either you or your father?
Oh my gosh. I completely identify with this, and it is something that I've only recently started to kind of absorb and acknowledge. I think my, I don't know who it was that said, you know, a situation such as the Holocaust and experiencing the loss and the, you know, now he talks so matter-of-factly about it, but I know that it was more than I think he can even express at his age now. There's so much lost through the years of the emotion and the trauma. But yeah, you know, I think you live in a situation where you either embrace and turn to the light, or you can be, you know, the other and suppress and internalize and angst. And unfortunately, I think that is where the direction my family has mostly turned. And, you know, I'm only now understanding the limitations that I've lived under, right? Emotional limitations, and how do you move beyond that? Like, how do you see the sunlight, right? How do you turn from adversity and living under an experience like this and being a child like myself and in this house of darkness and suppression and sadness, and how do you turn that around for my kids, right? How do you have them look to aspire to great things and have hope?
Tell me about your children and how they've reacted.
So, I was not raised with a lot of religion. I was raised with the culture of the Holocaust. I wouldn't even necessarily say the culture of Judaism, but the culture of the Holocaust, because that is what I experienced. I knew the suffering. I didn't necessarily know, you know, maybe when I was younger, the holidays were a component of my life, but as we got older, less so. My mother did not grow up especially religious. So, you know, I have 2 boys. My older son is now 12. The younger just turned 11. And, you know, my older tells me I'm not Jewish. And I'm like, well, you were born to 2 Jewish parents. You are Jewish. And he's like, why would I want to be that? He's like, people want to kill me just for being Jewish. And, you know, I think that there is angst about it and fear, trepidation. You know, but, you know, they are we started Hebrew school pre-COVID, and then unfortunately we were displaced and, you know, things shut down and we didn't continue it. And now we're in this kind of unusual place as my son approaches his 13th birthday. So one of the things that we discussed was, you know, and more meaningful for him and for me would be instead of a party, was to do a heritage tour. So now we're talking about going to Poland and going to Lithuania, and, you know, now with what's happening in, you know, Poland and Belarus and all of those, we have to kind of be strategic about it. But, you know, I feel like my path to exploring Judaism and giving them some of a foundation of that is through the idea of this tour, of having them experience, you know, a little bit of the culture and that real life experience, because I don't know how, I'm not the best at
Have they had
giving that.
Holocaust education in their schools?
No, they really haven't.
And where do you live?
I'm in Brooklyn. They're in a charter school. No, there hasn't really been a lot of to my knowledge, a lot of education or direction about that.
So, Mr. Blankfield, have you spoken to your grandchildren about your experiences?
No, I haven't.
Julie, what do you think about that?
You know, they're still young. I remember sitting on the couch and him watching ad nauseum documentaries on the Holocaust at very young. I mean, young, 6, 7, 8, and watching people getting shot and videos of bodies. And I myself, in my 20s, went to a concentration camp in my own travels. You know, and so, you know, I think that there's a balance of like wanting them to know, but maybe waiting to when the time is right, and when do we share this?
Well, you will get a copy of this video,
Yeah,
so when the time is right, it might be the best time.
yeah. So, but I mean, you know, that was a conversation about, you know, this summer in our travels. You know, do we take them to a Holocaust, to a concentration camp? Do we explain to them what, you know, what this is? It's, you know, suffering, Jewish identity, the future of Judaism, and, you know, more importantly, a more moderate Judaism, right? It's like I know that Orthodox are thriving in numbers, but, you know, where to,
Thank God for them.
no, because, you know, Dad, they wouldn't, it's a balance, right? They don't acknowledge us as you as Jewish or me as Jewish.
The White Sox, the
Okay.
White Soxers, yeah, the
No.
ones who live in Iran,
Mm-mm.
okay, don't believe in the state of Israel. They also, if you go down Bedford Avenue and you see, when you go underneath the Brooklyn Queens Expressway, you can see the people walking, and every
Mhm.
so often you'll find somebody walking with white socks,
Okay,
okay?
I know.
That's another,
I live
is
in
it-
Brooklyn now, Dad, I know.
I know.
I see
Yeah.
them, but you know what? There's plenty of others. I mean, you know, that would, you know, don't acknowledge us, right? I mean, that's the humor, is that the lack of tolerance and acceptance of, you know, my kids playing in the park and seeing kids who are Orthodox, clearly, and not. I remember when my kids were small and playing in the park, and them not even acknowledging them. So again, I think that, you know, the future of a moderate, Reform, Jewish future is at risk, and it is, you know, something I wrestle with often, and what my role is in, you know, what my role is there, and of, you know, of 2 Jewish children, and how do I, you know, push them into that direction. Sorry.
Yeah,
Knowing that this video will be available to your family, to your 2 boys,
Yeah,
to the future of your entire family,
yeah.
their families, their children, what message would you like to leave?
Ooh.
You can't hide it from them forever, Julie.
It's not a matter of hiding, it's a matter of sharing. What message do I want to leave?
What do you think would be important for them to know?
Oh, I want them to be strong. I want them to be true to themselves, you know, to be a kind human, right? And my dad, I know, touched on that earlier. But, you know, also that the future of this entire culture, religion, rests on the importance of them carrying on those traditions and, continuing to not be afraid, right? To be proud of your origins, of where you come from. It is a badge of honor, and to, continue in that light, to push that message, but also in the frame of kindness and acceptance of others.
Is there anything you'd like to say to your father before we finish this interview?
I've been wanting my father to participate in a interview forum like this for a very long time. I know that my grandparents were vehemently opposed to participating for some reason. I think there was fear, or maybe it was just the idea of being put on the spot and talking about it was just more than they could bear. And it was only in the past few months that my dad was willing to put his story to tape, and I'm really glad that he did. I love him so much. I am very proud to be his daughter.
Do you believe that? Could I have your autograph? Oh, you
Yeah.
want mine?
I know,
Come on,
I know,
come on. I'm the guy that breaks out in tears all the
I
time.
know. We love you, and you are such a kind and wonderful human. You're a generous, giving
Just
person.
destroyed my whole tough.
Yeah,
Thank you
know?
both. Thank you so much.
thank you.
All right, Ms. Barb, if you will take your mic off,
got
if
me
you stay
going now.
seated.
Oh, I'm sorry, Barbara. Thank you.
It happens to me too,
I think I wasn't expecting to be this, so I think I rambled. I'm sorry.
Julie, if you will.
Yes. Okay.
Oh, Barb, your mic.
Oh, whoops.
She steals these things.